Good morning. Welcome to week 2 of Pacific Northwest Sports on our weekly updates. To start off, we had your UW Huskies playing Eastern Michigan, They got a nice win, 30-9. Now, starting off slow seems to be something that's a pattern now with UW as they've done it the past 2 weeks. UW actually didn't score in the first quarter, but they put up 21 in the second, proving that they can be explosive and still have the ability to put up points in bunches. You can't put too much water into these types of things because it was two lower level opponents. Perhaps they started off slow, but it is worrying to see a game start off like that. Now, there's a neutral site game next week against Wazoo, and word is going around that UW has sold triple the tickets than Wazoo has. So this neutral site game that really from the beginning wasn't a neutral site game. I mean, Lumen Field is maybe 20 minutes away from UW campus, and that's with a little bit of traffic, but they've tripled the sales, so this neutral site game may be more of a UW home game, which is going to help when playing against Wazoo, especially given how Wazoo's played. We'll talk about that in a minute. But overall, your player of the game is Will Rogers, 21 of 26 for 261 yards and 4 touchdowns, proving that, he can still be that guy. It's going to be really big to see what that guy looks like against Wazoo next week. Now, your Cougars played Texas Tech, and they won 37-16. So it was nerves that affected Wazoo in week 1 when they allowed Portland State to do what Portland State did. The offense is still explosive. They still have playmakers in the back end. They're a little bit younger because this isn't as much of a veteran-led team. To put it simply, if Wazoo wanted it, they got it against Texas Tech. Now, I do worry about what happens when they have to stop the run for 4 quarters because Texas Tech and Portland State had times where they could just run the ball down Wazoo's throat, and there was little they could do to stop it. So if UW really wants to play smash mouth football, this could be a problem. Player of the game, John Mateer. And I mean, wow. I don't want to get too into it. Let's see how he plays against Wazoo before I start giving praise, but he went 9 of 15 for 115 yards and a touchdown. There was at least 4 to 5 different drop balls by his wide receivers. So that easily could have been looking at 13 of 15, maybe 14 of 15. He also ran for 197 yards on 21 attempts and another touchdown. Now, this 197 was the most for a quarterback since, I believe, 1987 for the Cougs. Quite impressive. So definitely something that's nice to see and have the addition of with the team. Now, Wazoo plays UW next week. So then over to Eastern Washington, where your Eastern Washington Eagles fell to Drake 32-35. Now, it was overtime, but it just wasn't to the Eastern's fortune. Simply put, having 2 turnovers on downs and a fumble isn't ideal. Eastern's still balanced, but the rest of the team is good in finding a way to win. The rest of the team is good enough to find a win over the adversity of turnovers, but you can't do that in close games. If this was a 42-21 game, a couple turnovers isn't going to bite you. But in these close games where stuff happens like this is where it's going to be an issue. So Eastern still has a chance. This doesn't knock them out of any sort of runnings for anything, but it's definitely something you want to keep an eye on because if a close game happens, you like to think that Eastern can pull it off, but maybe not. Over to Central Washington, your Wildcats played San Diego, and they lost 7-26. Now, the offense just didn't convert the way you expected. The defense was their normal selves. They got stops, forcing 3 and outs. But at a certain time, you can't rely on your defense to do that for you the entire game. You just can't do it. So Central will play Colorado Mesa next week. Your PLU Lutes played Simpson, California, and there's really not much to say other than they dominated and won 43-0, and they did it all through the air. Quarterback Darius Chafin, 21 of 24 for 340 yards and 4 touchdowns. PLU plays Concordia College next week. Now, your Puget Sound Loggers played Lewis and Clark, and they lost 21-59. Now, it's nice for Lewis and Clark, but as the tradition, they didn't count this towards the Northwest Conference standings. On Lewis and Clark's side, they returned the first punt they faced for a touchdown and then forced 3 first-half red zone turnovers. Puget Sound clearly has all the things going right for them, and this is their 3rd straight game scoring at least 59 points. This dates back to last year as well. Player of the game, the Pioneers rushing attack. 7.9 yards per carry, 301 total yards on 38 attempts. So let's give it to the big old lineman Hogmellies up front, right? Lewis and Clark will play Pacific next week. Puget Sound will play Southwestern University. Over to Whitworth. Whitworth raced out to a 20-0 lead and did so with some luck and some lockdown defense. Jay, what do you mean by luck? Well, let me tell you. It's 4th down. The Pirates decide, all right, let's just go ahead and kick a field goal. But it's blocked, and the ball goes across the line of scrimmage, causing the Whitworth Pirates to jump on it. 2 plays later, they capitalized with a touchdown. The defense held the All-American wide receiver Jake Brickback from Gustavus to 4 catches for 84 yards. The player of the game, Evan Leggett, he had 8 caught passes for 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had an interception at the end of the first half, so maybe he's the Pacific Northwest Conference of Travis Hunter. He's that version. Whitworth will play Eastern Oregon next week. Over in Oregon, our Oregon Ducks played Boise State, and they won 37-34. Now, I'm sure most of you were watching this game, or maybe you didn't have Peacock and you weren't, but is Boise State that good? Or is Oregon now played down to their opponents 2 weeks in a row? Make no mistakes, Boise has the best running back in the country in Austin Jeanty. It's not even close. He is the best running back. I know people think Ollie Gordon. It's not him. It is Austin Jeanty. But at what point are we going to start saying, okay, Oregon's either really, really good, Boise State's really, really good, or Oregon is playing down to their level, and that's not going to work in Big Ten when you get to Big Ten play. It just won't. You have teams that you have to. Ohio State? I know you went into Ohio State and you won there 2 years ago, but we got to get that fixed ASAP. If this Oregon team is going to make the college football playoffs, they can't have games where you play down to this. And it's either on Dan Lanning for allowing the team to play down to this level 2 times in a row, or it's on Oregon's overhyped expectations. Phil Knight opened up the Nike checkbook and said, hey, anybody you guys want to get, I just want to see a championship in my lifetime. This is a problem. So I have no doubt. I like Dan Lanning. I think he's a great coach, but someone's got to get fixed because too many close calls. Oregon plays Oregon State next week. Boise State has a bye. Now we got your Oregon State Beavers who played San Diego State. Boring, but a win's a win. They won 21-0. Oregon State is built right. McCoy is the quarterback for the job, but something about their wins just doesn't excite me. Now, it could be that I'm looking for the pure dominance they showed under Jonathan Smith, but if this team can take the past 2 solid wins and beat Oregon, whose people are claiming is college football contender, maybe then we can start looking at Oregon State and saying, hey, they don't need to be flashy because they'll just win the game. The Beavs, needless to say, play Oregon State next week, but let's see what this offense really looks like. Oregon State easily could have had 28 points as on a flea flicker, Giovanni McCoy threw an absolute dime to the receiver, and it went straight through his hands, through his chest pad, and down to the ground. Now, the Portland State Vikings played Weber State, and Weber State came on top 43-16. Now, the Vikings couldn't really get much going against Weber State, and that's par for the course because Weber State prides itself on a strong defensive style of football. They also run the ball really well. Player of the game, Damon Bankston, 15 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Portland State plays South Dakota next week. Weber State plays Lamar next week. Over to your Western Oregon Wolves, who played Idaho State University, and they lost 10-15. Idaho State won, but that's what we expect when you invite a D2 school to come play you. The player of the game, Ian Duarte, 9 catches, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Western Oregon will play Cal Poly next week. Idaho State will play North Dakota next week. The George Fox Bruins versus Redlands ended up getting postponed to 9-8. That's today on Sunday. Because of the time I record these in, I'm actually not able to give an update. Please check X. We'll have an update on what that score ended up being. Linfield played Denison and won 31-7. Simply dominance. But would you expect anything less from Linfield? They got out to a 31-0 lead in the first half and then coasted the win the rest of the way. The player of the game, All-American linebacker Blake Rybar, who had 6 total tackles, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown. Linfield plays Wisconsin Oshkosh next week. Your Pacific Boxers played Chapman University and came out with a loss, 23-34. You got to get some stops. Otherwise, a game that you could win turns into a game that you should have won. That's what happened here. Pacific plays Lewis and Clark next week. Your Willamette Bearcats played Laverne and came out with a win, 27-24. A win for Willamette is amazing. Now, they haven't beat a conference foe in 7 years, but hopefully this lays down the blueprint for what to do to accomplish that goal this year. Now, this is a full 4 quarters of football, and then double OT. Willamette got the win off of a game-winning field goal. The player of the game, Elijah Romero, 9 receptions, 124 yards, and a touchdown. Willamette will play George Fox next week. Eastern Oregon versus Montana Western, they lost 21-59. But, I mean, come on. Montana Western is one of the best NAI schools in the nation. Montana Western dominated from opening whistle to closing whistle. Player of the game, anyone shocked here? Eli Norse. What did he do? All-American started off his year with 9 receptions, 126 yards, and 1 touchdown. Eastern Oregon will play Whitworth next week. Montana Western will play a huge game next week against the College of Idaho. Southern Oregon Raiders played against Lincoln and won 46-7. This is 400 all-time wins for the Southern Oregon football team. Clearly, the defense knew it was a big game as they shut out Lincoln's offense. You might be wondering where the 7 came from. Well, Southern Oregon actually fumbled the ball, and it was returned for a touchdown by Lincoln. But the defense only allowed 132 yards of total offense. Player of the game, the whole team. 400 wins in the history of the sport, but also shutting out your opponent. Southern Oregon will play Simpson next week. Idaho Vandals played Wyoming and won 17-13. After coming up close against Wyoming, Jason Eck and the Vandals were able to get their... After coming up close against Oregon, Jason Eck and the Vandals were able to get their revenge on Wyoming. This is the first win over Wyoming in over 100 years, and the first ever win in Laramie. Player of the game, Elijah Cummings. 16 attempts, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Idaho will play Albany next week, and what is a revenge game for this Idaho team that actually lost to Albany last year in the Kibbe Dome to knock them out of the playoffs. Wyoming, well, they need a win. Hopefully, they can get it back next week when they play BYU. Now, Montana Grizzlies played North Dakota and lost 24-27. It's shocking to watch Montana lose, but North Dakota is always a tough team to play. In fact, they lead the all-time series against Montana. Perhaps what's most frustrating is that North Dakota scored 20 unanswered second-half points to win this game. 6 sacks and somehow forgetting to play second-half defense led to the loss, but this is the worry, right? At times last year, you held your breath hoping Montana will get through the game for a win, and it just wasn't in the cards. Perhaps what needs to happen is we need to look more at the defense. I'm not a coach, but these are the things that I saw. Montana will play Moorhead State next week. Your University of Montana Bobcats played Maine. They won 41-24. Montana State's back to its winning ways, rushing for 344 yards as a team. Tommy Mellett played decently well as a passer, and honestly, if the defense can't just blow up... And honestly, if the defense can't just bow up a little bit better, this MSU team can be a big threat this year. They should need a little bit more from their defense. Player of the game, Scotty Humphrey, 4 attempts, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So every other time he touches the ball, he scores a touchdown for him. And he's averaging a little bit over 25 yards per carry. The Carroll Fighting Saints played Montana Tech. They lost 22-30. Things go well when you start off your day with an interception, a recovered fumble. Let's also not forget the blocked punt, and the late game fake punt that Montana Tech ran to give them the ball where they were able to just knee out the win. So overall, we knew this Frontier Conference was deep, but to be this deep is special. Montana Tech starts off with a nice win against Carroll. Player of the game, Jaden Downs, 2 tackles and a pick He returned 52 yards. Carroll plays Rocky Mountain next week. Montana Tech has a well-deserved bye. Now, your MSU Northern Lights played Rocky Mountain College, and they lost 12-27. But after a semi-close first half, the Battling Bears really turned it on and won in the second half. This allowed them to take control and win the game. Now, a blocked punt in the first half would actually be the last points the Lights get. The player of the game, Graydon Buell, 17 rushes, 104 yards, and a touchdown. The Lights have next week off. The Battling Bears get to play Carroll. Over in Utah, your BYU Cougars played SMU, and they won 18-15. Now, BYU coordinator Jay Hill had a heart attack on August 29th, and he now shut down what was supposed to be a high-octane SMU offense. BYU is good, and they're finding ways to win, which is what's important. But they need to be able to do a little bit more with their offense. Relying on your defense to hold teams to 15 or less points is just not going to be a recipe for success. This is going to be an exciting year for BYU, and I personally cannot wait to see what they do. As you guys know, BYU kind of has a history of just being absolute dominance, and so having them in the Big 12 should be really exciting. They play Wyoming next week, which is going to be huge. The Utah Utes played Baylor and won 23-12. It's a win, but we need to know, is Cam Rising going to be okay long term? Now, they said it's just his hand. It doesn't appear to be serious, but you never know how long those Kings could kind of do. Without him, this offense struggles mightily. And it's the same thing with Montana, where you kind of hold your breath and you go, can they make it out of this one? And in this one, they did. They won 23-12, but I believe they were 24-point favorites. So definitely something to watch out for. The player of the game, Cam Rising, 8-14, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Simple, efficient football from him, but always exciting to see. Utah plays Utah State next week. Utah State Aggies played against USC and lost 0-48. Let's hope things get better and soon, because you have a game against the Utes coming up, and you need to win that game. Utah Tech Trailblazers played UNLV and lost 14-72. They're going up against an extremely underrated team who may very well end up being ranked next week. The go-go offense is extremely hard to prepare for and extremely hard to stop, as it almost reminds you of the wishbone. And UNLV was first place in the Mid-Mountain West Conference last year. I mean, what more do you want from them? Utah Tech plays Northern Arizona next week. Flush it and move on. Then you have your Southern Utah Thunderbirds, who played UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. They won 27-24. Now, this is why you never sleep on a team. Southern Utah took the no one thinks we can win mindset and went in and won against UTEP. Another FCS team to do that this year. Player of the game, Targy Lamson. 20 carries, 183 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Southern Utah plays UC Davis next week. All right, guys, let's run through all of next week's opponents one more time. In Washington, your Huskies play Wazoo. Eastern Washington plays Southeastern Louisiana. Central Washington plays Colorado Mesa. Pacific Lutheran plays Concordia. Puget Sound plays Southwestern. Whiteworth plays Eastern. Over in Oregon, your Ducks play the Beavs. Portland State plays South Dakota. Western Oregon plays Cal Poly. George Fox plays Willamette. Lewis and Clark plays Pacific. Linfield plays Wisconsin Oshkosh. Southern Oregon plays Simpson. Idaho plays in Idaho. We have your Vandals playing Albany. Idaho State playing North Dakota. College of Idaho playing Montana Western. In Montana, we have your Montana Grizzlies playing Morehead State. Carroll Fighting Saints playing Rocky Mountain. Wyoming, we have Wyoming versus BYU. Utah, we have the Utes versus Utah State. We have the Utah Tech Trailblazers against Northern Arizona. We have the Weber State Wildcats versus Lamar. And then your Southern Utah Thunderbirds versus UC Davis. What a run. Also, I have the lucky opportunity to be going to the Apple Cup, which is always fun. So that should be a really good game. Overall, guys, I'm lucky that you guys are listening to me. Feel free to leave comments here, send me an email, do whatever you got to do on social media. But we're still working on these. I'm glad you guys are still enjoying them. So have a great day.